Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friends Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, today joined by Mr. Gerbrandt van Heerden. Gerry, how are you doing?
Hi, Nick. Tired, but otherwise good.
That's an inauspicious start to the week, I think. If it's only Monday, you're already running out of energy, but I wish you all strength. And we are also joined today by Mr. Terence Corrigan. Terence, how are you?
Gerry's too young to be tired. He's not allowed to be.
Thank you, Terence, for saying that I'm too young. I appreciate that. Thank you.
When you get to my age, you are thankful if you can just make it through the day without falling asleep.
All the things I have to look forward to in my life. Okay, let's start off with our first story of today. And this is, we're going to talk about one of the most important party policy developments of the past couple of months. And that is, so we saw the EFF's manifesto launch last weekend. And this weekend, or the weekend we've just had, was the DA's manifesto launch. And considering the DA is very likely to remain the second largest party in the country, and very possibly, although it is unlikely, there's still a possibility that they may end up being a part of a national government. So, with that in mind, what does the DA manifesto look like? Well, it commits basically to 7 sort of major promises. They say that if they were the government between 2024 and 2029, the DA would 1. Create 2 million new jobs. 2. End load shedding and water shedding. 3. Halve the rate of violent crime, including murder, attempted murder, and gender-based violence. 4. Crush corruption by abolishing cadre deployment in favor of merit-based appointments in a capable state that delivers for all. 5. Lift 6 million people out of poverty. 6. Triple the number of grade 4 learners who can read for meaning. That's, I think, increasing the number. I think that number is currently something like 20%. So that's actually a surprisingly low target. And 7, ensure quality healthcare for all, irrespective of economic status. So they then lay out several ideas about how to do each of these objectives. So I think today we should just kind of have a little bit of a look at these and think about how credible we think they are and whether this is a good manifesto or not. So talking about the jobs plan, there's a whole bunch of things, but I'm just going to pick out a couple of them. They want to overhaul restrictive regulations within the Labour Relations Act that currently deter hiring and instead foster an environment that promotes job creation. They want to facilitate skills development, to carve out a distinct apprenticeship category within the Labour Relations Act. They want to remove racial targets or quotas in the Employment Equity and Preferential Procurement Acts, measuring progress towards sustainable development goals rather as a way of doing redress. So in other words, looking at socioeconomic status and poverty rather than race for whether you're complying with redress stuff, affirmative action stuff. Broadening the collective bargaining system so that it is representative of the bargaining parties. And this is, I think, a key piece here. We will also exempt small, medium, and micro enterprises from the administrative extension of bargaining council agreements. That basically means that very small companies would be exempt from sector wage increases and that kind of thing. Making labor unions to pay a deposit before they can strike, and then if there's damage caused during that strike, that gets taken from the deposit. So let's start off on this job section. Terence, let me start with you. What do you make of these claims? Do you think that they're a credible thing? For what it's worth, I think that they do definitely address some of the core things that need to be done in order to turn around the jobs problem. But what's your thoughts?
I think that they kind of move the needle in the right direction. I do have some concerns about the constitutionality, for instance, of a deposit before striking. I think there's also, let me say, a little inbuilt contradiction there that you want to liberalize the labor market while constricting labor activism. I think that they would have an interesting argument to make about that, about the, let's say, lack of consistency there. But my major concern is the idea that you can that you can sort of put a number on the jobs that you will create. Now, 2 million is a very, very big ask, and I think that we're going to get into all sorts of questions. Well, are you talking about jobs or job opportunities? We've seen the ANC do this regularly. My own sense is that I think that freeing up smaller enterprises from the clasp of labor legislation is a good idea. In fact, I think that's essential. But those things in themselves, I don't think are going to be decisive. And I think that what one has to keep in mind is there's a broader issue here, and that is, how do we get economic growth moving? And I think this is we need a mindset shift across the board in South Africa. The idea that policy should focus on creating jobs, that's fair enough. I mean, that's the offering you want to make to a population suffering 40+% unemployment, but that is a happy byproduct of growth. If you don't get the growth going, your jobs are either not going to come, or they are going to be, in some sense, make work. And I think in that case, you're probably better off just handing over a check to those who might have been your beneficiaries.
So each of the sections of their manifesto has this thing at the top called Our Bold Solution, and then it has some sort of kind of keystone plan for creating jobs. So, Harry, I want your thoughts on this one. Their bold solution for the unemployment stuff is that they want to create a youth employment opportunity certificate. The certificate will allow young people to be exempt from the minimum wage if they choose to be so. If the goal is to make it easier for young people aged 18 to 35 to move from not having a job to having one by offering flexible employment terms, the certificate will be valid for 2 years and will be implemented to give unemployed people who have not been employed for 12 months or more the right to exempt themselves from sectoral wage agreements if they choose so. What do you make of that, and what do you make of some of the other things that Terence and I have talked about already?
Yeah, I think that's an ideal goal. I mean, part of the reason why our unemployment rate is one of the highest in the world is that the policies enacted in South Africa are extremely inflexible, very rigid. People can't choose to, work for whatever sort of income. There has to be some sort of minimum wage, and it's almost like the government saying that it's better for you to be unemployed than do any job at all. So I think the DA's proposal is there is merit to it, and I think regarding their broader manifesto, a lot of the things that they mentioned or listed in the manifesto is something that they've already implemented or started to implement in the province that they control, the Western Cape. I mean, they have this red tape reduction unit in the Cape, which creates a little bit more of a business-friendly environment. They have, for example, the law enforcement. Let me just check the law enforcement advancement plan, the LEAP initiative that has actually had some meaningful impact in reducing crime levels in the poorer areas of Cape Town. They've started to have private individuals, organizations selling electricity back into the grid, if I remember correctly. So the DA manifesto, I think they mention a lot of the basics that need to be done right. Things that the ANC will never do. For example, the taking away transformation policies or empowerment policies. That's a big gap policy-wise between the DA and the ANC. So yeah, I think the problem is, I think even though the Democratic Alliance's manifesto has a lot of the right things listed, will they ever have the opportunity to implement it? Because the DA has always been a 20% party. It's really struggled to break that barrier, and even if I mean, their Moonshot Pact barely gets 35%. I think the real question is, you know, how is the DA actually going to be able to convince voters to come back to it, and so that they can actually implement what's in their manifesto.
Right. You know, even if they did fantastically well, you know, beyond what the polls suggest, let's say they get 30% of the vote, you're still going to have a coalition, probably with some parties that have quite a different point of view on some of these ideas. So I don't know, maybe we could even view this manifesto as like the starting point in a negotiation with some of its coalition partners, is to say, you know, this is where we're coming from. Let's meet you halfway on some of these. One of the difficulties, though, I think in the manifesto sort of broader goals here is when you combine, when you look at the problems of grants and finances. So they commit to no new taxes. They commit to no stealth taxes. They say that they will expand the number of items that are exempt from VAT to include bone-in chicken, beef, tinned beans, wheat flour, margarine, peanut butter, baby food, tea, coffee, and soup powder, which I'm sure will be very popular amongst particularly very poor South Africans. But then they have to sort of try and make up the money for that, right? And so they have a number of ideas. They say they'll improve state-owned enterprises through a balanced approach to privatization. They'll make SOEs financially responsible, fostering competition and innovation. They will try and create economic growth by introducing one-stop shops for small businesses to reduce time and cost of starting a business. They'll create debt ceilings in the form of a fiscal rule to limit annual government borrowing, avoiding further debt crises. And they have a whole bunch of decentralized ideas for dealing with everything from ESCOM to crime. They say they'll have rural protection units, they'll have decentralized police force into each province, things that I am a very big fan of. But the question becomes, you know, it's going to be quite a difficult balancing act, even if you could wave a wand and eliminate all of the waste and poor spending in government to increase grants and avoid new taxes. They also want to increase the child support grant to the same level as the official food poverty line, and they want to turn the social relief of distress grant into what they call a job seekers grant, which is that you get money as long as you are actively seeking work opportunities and provide evidence that you are looking for work. Terence, what do you make of those two sort of slightly conflicting ideas?
In principle, they're not bad, but I think that you do run into something that a prospective new government would face, and that is that you're going to have the civil service you have, not the one that you want. So let's say the advantage, I think, of South Africa's current social grant system. It seems that there are a great many people who are benefiting from it who are not, let's say, intended beneficiaries, but there are civil servants who simply see this as a poverty reduction measure, and therefore are inclined to sort of approve as many comers as possible. If you're not having to sort of prove that you qualified through a series of administrative tests, then that is a fairly simple thing to honor. And I think this is kind of what the social relief of distress grant does. It steps in and provides what in many ways is a kind of basic income grant. Now, if you are going to try and put you turn this into a job seekers or sort of conditional grant, then you would have to take into account what just how reliably could you test these things. Now, there are countries with far more capable civil services than we have, and also far more experience at dispensing social protection systems, which find this extremely difficult. I was told about a case in Britain by my late brother, who said that there was a guy who had to show up, to be validated for his job seekers allowance, and the official responsible would just start the meeting by saying, "I presume you haven't looked for anything. I presume you have no intention of looking for anything, and you just need me to sign your form." And he said, "Yep, that's pretty much it, because I'm a dole blodger." And that was just kind of the way it went. I think that ultimately things like making these systems function better, one can't argue with that. But I do think that is the work of a number of years. And I think that scaling back the sort of tax obligations is likely to be to involve a very difficult fiscal balancing act. So I think let's maybe look at this as an exercise in idealism, which would probably run into a wall of reality. But I think at least they are talking about these things. At least they have put them on the agenda.
Yeah, the thing about the job seekers grant is that there are similar programs in a lot of developed countries, and I do know that some abuse definitely takes place there, where you have people who will get a job for like 2 weeks. They'll find a job somewhere that goes on for 2 weeks, and then they'll quit it immediately as soon as they sort of qualify for the thing. But I do think that is a minority of people, and that considering how pervasive unemployment is in South Africa, there certainly would be a lot who would take up this opportunity to be like, no, this is actually something to just keep me going until I can get a job.
Look, I don't. I'm not. I just want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that that there are going to be all sorts of prospective beach bums, exploiting this. But I'm saying that if you impose particular reporting and qualification criteria, someone has to administer these, and I'm not sure that that is going to be an easy thing to do.
No, definitely.
So perhaps I've done through every group, but
yeah, it's part of the problem is that there's a lot of sort of good ideas in this manifesto, but for some of them to work, you need to do other things. But then for those ones to work, so you need to. They have a section, for example, on reforming the civil service, and their big idea there is pretty much to separate party and state between each other and reduce political interference in public service. Official selection, introduce exams for public servants to get certain positions. It sounds kind of good, but then you also have to kind of keep running government at the same time while trying to reform the public service, and you also need to get down crime. So it's I think looking through some of these solutions, you kind of get a sense that while even when you have good ideas, the actual task of implementing a lot of them is going to be a very big challenge, considering how big the problems already are.
Let me just sort of illustrate from a personal experience what I'm after. I've just reapplied for a passport, and let me say that this new system where you don't actually have to fill any papers or whatever, and they take your photograph. It's great. It worked wonderfully. Okay, long queues and whatever, but. And let me just say, I had to go there 3 times because the first 2 times the system was down. So when it works, it works. When it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's actually
where they took your fingerprint with a roller and ink. You could still do that.
No, that's a good point. I don't know if they actually have anything in here about it. I may have missed it if they do, but there's something to be said for overhauling most of the country's IT systems, which are hideously inefficient and break all the time and unworkable. Or as the that I remember looking at the Gauteng website for an article I was writing, I think a year ago, and the Gauteng provincial website, and I remember clicking through the pages and seeing multiple banners which read "Place image here." They never finished the website, so that's definitely something that needs to be turned around. Kerry, any final thoughts on this before we move on?
Yeah, I think the problems South Africa's facing currently is Herculean. It's going to be a mammoth task to fix it. I mean, isn't the DA in control of the Tshwane Metropolitan at the moment? And we don't really hear any good news stories there at the moment, because Tshwane has been run to the ground, has been run into the ground so much that it's going to take a long time to turn things around. And I think that's going to be even, more so for the rest of the country. It's, the DA says that, they want to expand a little bit more on our social safety net, and it is feasible to, lower taxes at the same time, or reduce taxes, because, this country has a reputation for the misallocation of resources, spending money where there shouldn't be money spent, the bailing out of SOEs, of course, corruption, state capture. So much money has gone to waste over the years. So if you can curb back on all of those things, then maybe it is possible to, keep taxes a bit lower and expand the welfare system. But once again, I mean, you will, in order to achieve that, you are going to have to work with a lot of, people who've really benefited from the system in some way or another over the years, and it's going to be difficult to overcome that, I think. But it's like Terence said, at least the DA is talking about these things, and they're moving the needle in the right direction, and they've opened the door to consider alternative good policies.
So obviously, something to have a look at as the elections come closer, and it's going to be interesting to see whether any of these do in fact become policy in the next government. I think it is definitely overall, I would say, a credible document in terms of a major political party manifesto. Certainly better than the EFF's. There will be 3 working shifts a day, so the economy works 24 hours a day stuff that they had in their manifesto. But anyway, let's go on to our next story. And also sticking with the DA here, the DA is demanding, it won a number of court battles, which forced the ANC to hand over the minutes of the cadre deployment meetings that they had. Particularly the ones that the DA is interested in are the ones between 2013 and 2018, when President Cyril Ramaphosa was the head of the cadre deployment committee in the ANC. But the ANC has said that, in fact, they don't have access to the minutes between 2012 and 2017, and that they won't be able to supply the DA with this. They need more time to collect some of the documents. There are lots of things included in the request that the DA's had. One of the things requested was was not just the minutes up to 2017, but also the minutes since David Mabuza was the chair from 2018, and apparently those are going to be handed over. They also requested emails and WhatsApps relating to the thing. The ANC said they need more time to do this, and they apparently called the DA on Friday asking for an extension. The DA says that this is not going to accept an extension. They think the ANC are dragging their feet on this, and that if they are not given everything they requested by the end of today, they will take the ANC to court on a contempt of court charge. The DA's Leon Schreiber said, "For them to call us only on Friday about that suggested they have not been very busy until Friday. They did indicate they are compiling it, and we told them that the deadline is today at 5 p.m. and they must comply with that. If they don't, then we will look into a contempt of court route. Terence, what do you make of this story?
I think it's a sort of Janus face thing. On the one hand, possibly the most consequential story of the decade, the past 2 decades, perhaps since the 1990s, because cadre deployment has constituted a form of systemic constitutional vandalism. This is corruption in the true sense, not about pilfering money or looting or whatever. This is about undermining and suborning institutions, so the institutions do not function. And that is the definition of corruption. On the other hand, I've always had suspicions that anything meaningful would be handed over. I think the one thing that the ANC will, well, I don't want to say never, but that I can't quite get my head around the idea that they would, is to hand over anything pertaining to the cadre deployment committee over which President Ramaphosa presided. I think that that for those who care about such things, and it's not universal, the great alibi for South Africa's malaise has been state capture, which I think was a phenomenon. But it's something that the president talks about as though it was perpetrated by someone else. That that was those people. That was the guys over there. That was the others.
I wonder who the deputy president was during the state capture period. I always forget.
That's the whole thing. As the wronged husband once said, I gather there's been a Roman holiday and my wife wasn't very far away. And I suspect that this could be that exposing that to the full glare of public scrutiny, that Gupta picks for various officers or whatever might have run through the cadre deployment committee under one Mr. Ramaforma, might be extremely embarrassing. And I think that there is a subsection of the ANC support base for which that would be extremely disappointing. As I say, look, I think that South Africans have kind of become inured to these sort of things, and much of the ANC's voting base freely acknowledges the ANC to be synonymous with corruption, and can sort of factor that in and reconcile it with a choice to vote in that direction. But I think that there is a group that is very turned off by it. And as long as they can, in their minds, believe this is all being done by, a certain former president now resident in Nkandla, and a certain expat family now resident in Dubai, and certain other people, that's an emotional bridge that they can cross. But as I say, I will sort of believe it, though, that we have had full disclosure of that sort of thing when I see it.
Harry, any thoughts on this before we close up for today?
It's it's huge. I mean, cadre deployment is the foundation of state capture, and President Ramaphosa has, when he campaigned to be president, he made corruption his center piece. He's going to fight against it and he's going to roll it back. Well, I think South Africa slipped again in the corruption perceptions index. We've hit a new low, and it's thanks to policies such as cadre deployment. So if the DA can manage to have the courts declare cadre deployment as unconstitutional, unlawful, then that could really go far away to get the ANC to loosen its grip on many pivotal state institutions that are collapsing all around us. It's a huge thing, but we'll have to wait and see if the ANC can, find these missing minutes.
Yeah, certainly not something the ANC wants to have come out just before the election, to show that their president may have perhaps been a little bit more involved in state capture than he's long claimed. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. We hope you found the show interesting. We'll be back tomorrow with the Daily Friend Wrap. Cheers, everyone, and have a most wonderful and excellent Monday.